We're going to take you through the team decision-making flow chart, which is a way of clarifying if you don't have a unanimous decision, what do you need to do to reach a consensus, and if you fall into a majority, what the risk of that is, and then how, in the most respectful way to make a decision by authority, should that become necessary. It all starts with this idea of just taking a survey. Turn to page 15. And it's just basically, you know, making sure everyone expresses an opinion. Sometimes when we ask, well, what do you all think about it? From the Myers-Briggs type indicator, who more likely is going to speak, extroverts or introverts? Extroverts. So you may not even know what the introverts have, and if they haven't had time to think about it and write something down, introverts may not even have a thought about it yet. I haven't had time to think about it. So meetings, by definition, are kind of an extroverted experience. They're anticipating and expecting that. Extroverts actually have to learn to contain themselves to... Are you shaking your head about that one?
I'm guilty.
To contain yourself, to allow other people to have an opinion. Because extroverts actually get energized by your thoughts out in the public. We want to talk about it, we want you to talk about it, we want to get back and forth. And introverts are waiting for a moment of silence, which indicates that people are finished saying what they have to say before an introvert will give what they have already come to realize is what they think. With a lot of extroverts in the room, there's not a lot of dead air. Those spaces tend not to exist very easily. So the good thing for a leader to do is take this survey, which really is saying, you know, tell me, having everyone give us their opinion. Now, you do need to be aware that sometimes people need time, and so sometimes writing down what you think about it is a good thing that we've done. If you notice, repeatedly, before we have you talk as a group, we have you take a moment to write something down. That energizes the introverts in the room, gives them a chance to figure out what they think before they have to say what they think. And I hope that was helpful. And then we give the chance to talk, to get the extroverts to have a chance to be energized. That's an important process. Each person in turn states their position. That's just the first step. Turn to page 16. I created this in 1972, part of an interdisciplinary faculty teaming workshop that I put together. And it stood the test of time, although at that time I didn't know about dealing with authority because I hadn't been one, and that last part wasn't in there. It just was clarifying the difference between unanimous consensus and majority decision. So I want to take you through this kind of point by point so you understand the process you will be leading teams through. And nobody has to know this process. You're the team lead. Your job is to facilitate team meetings. You just have to be aware of where the decision points are, which is what the diamonds are. In flow charts, diamonds are decision points. So you always start with taking a survey. You got to find, is there a minority? If there's no minority, what does that mean? Everyone has the same position, and we've got a unanimous decision, and we're out of here.
Just one point I wanted to make about what Rob is describing of taking a survey. Have you ever been in a meeting and you come up and you put something on the table? Okay, this is what we're going to do. Is that okay with everybody? And some heads nod and other heads don't nod, and so it just generally seems to be accepted, so you go on thinking that everyone has bought into it. That is not taking a survey, because you don't know what they think, and they actually have to say something, even if what they end up saying is, I'm not going to say anything about it just yet. I want to think about this. They have to actually put it out there.
They're abstaining in the vote parlance, but you still are getting where they are in the moment. So we're assuming that, I want to back that up. So we're assuming that everybody has contributed their point of view, but we don't have a unanimous decision. By definition, we have a minority. Now, as you said earlier, in that moment, typically, the majority believes, hey, we've got the momentum, we're almost to the goal line, we've just got these few stragglers here who don't understand, let's show them why they're wrong. And the majority focuses on trying to convince the minority why the majority is right. Now, what does that guarantee to produce in the minority? Resistance. They will defend the point of view that the majority is trying to get them to let go of. Anytime your first approach to someone is to point out that you disagree with them, you force them to hold tighter to the opinion you're wanting them to let go of. It's just an emotional habit we all have. They make an assumption, not only do you not understand, obviously you do not want to understand, and that forces them to be resistant. It's guaranteed. So don't do it.
Rob, a couple weeks ago I was in jury duty. It was 11 to 1 in the deliberation room. So I lived that, and it lasted an extra entire day because that one person, I mean, everybody believes what they believe, but
Were you
that's what
that
I'm
person?
thinking of when you're
Were you that person?
I was not that person. I was in the majority.
One of the greatest team building early in the 50s experiences was based around the movie The 12 Angry Men. Jason Cobb, is that his name? Henry Fonda. It's classic. There was a remake of it some decades later. But let me encourage you to see this film. It's 12 Angry Men. And the way it was used in the team building, they would show it, and it's exactly the same thing. It's a trial, and it comes down to 11 in the majority and 1 in the minority. The minority was Henry Fonda in this case. And they stop the film in the training, and then they say, okay, it's your team's task to come up with what sequence of changes, because at the end, everyone changes their vote to agree with the one person. In what sequence do they change? Is the task to come up with. And then they play the rest of the film. But it's a very, very powerful film, and I would encourage you to look for an opportunity to watch it. We're recommending a model designed on change management principles, on the martial art of communication training, that would always say you want to understand the other person's point of view if you want to have any chance of them understanding yours. You want to understand first. Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the 7 habits is seek first to understand. Seek first. In fact, if you have that humility about being open-minded about not knowing everything, you're going to be curious why someone doesn't see what you see, and you're going to want to find out. People will tolerate a disagreement when they experience being understood. They don't tolerate not being understood. So in this model, what we're recommending is that the majority focus on the minority's point of view. In fact, the way it's stated is, understand, the minority reviews its position, and the majority describes the minority's position. This is the exact opposite of what normally happens in teams. So the middle of the recognition there is a minority, you should say to the minority, okay, tell us, why do you think differently than us? Even if you went that far, it's so seductive. There's just such a habit we all have. As soon as we hear them go, oh, and then start to tell them why that's wrong. The step that's missing is restating so that they experience being understood. And it's not on here, but it's in the communication training. If you could take the second stage in the 6-stage process of acknowledging where you agree, that's even better. There's a difference between us having an accurate understanding and the other person experiencing being understood. We could have an accurate understanding of the minority's point of view and they not experience being understood, and they're going to be just as defensive. So you want to empty them out, just like in that water glass demonstration that Stephen did. of their ideas so that there's an openness and a willingness to consider. So the next question, does the minority believe the majority understands? Okay, yeah, you understand why we're in the minority. If the answer is no, then we repeat this process. There's something we didn't get as the majority. Sometimes just that process will produce changes because there were misunderstandings a majority of the time, by the way.
One of the points that Rob's trying to emphasize there is not just the majority believes that they understand the minority's position.
Right.
It's not enough. It may be true. Actually, the majority may understand better. But what you want to do in order to reduce the resistance is the minority has to accept and confirm, yep, you got it, that's everything, there's nothing else. They have to do that to let go of, holding on to their point.
So just like we have to have people state their opinion, you have to have the minority acknowledge that they are understood. Okay. And to see if there's any changes in position, because sometimes there is. Oh, that's what you meant. Oh, we didn't think about that. Or you're right about that. We need to include that. And sometimes that states a new decision. Now let's see what happens. Sometimes that's all that's necessary to create a unanimous decision. Just a little misunderstanding sometimes. But let's say no, there is no change in a position. Now here's the crunch about creating a consensus. The minority experience is being understood. Hopefully they've been agreed with as much as they can, but there's still a disagreement. The question you ask to the minority is, okay, are you willing to live with, support, and not sabotage? If they say yes, that's a consensus decision. And the support implies actively support. To passively support would be to sabotage. Now you may still believe it's not the best, but I'm willing to take the risk. I'm going to support and go on with this as well. If that's the case, then we have a consensus decision. But maybe the minority goes, no, this is too important. This is critical to the mission's success. This is a failure if we go down that road. We're not willing to do that. Well, then there's a negotiation question. And I'd like you to write this down somewhere because I think this will maybe save your marriage and save your job or something. Sometimes you're going to come to this crunch. The question is, what would it take for me to want to do what they want me to do? What would it take for me to want to do what they want me to do? I don't think we ask ourselves that question very often. And because of that, we don't come up with a potential compromise or negotiation. It's not even a compromise if it's doing what you want. I think if you ask yourself that question, a majority of the time you'll come up with something. And I think when you come up with something and present it, I think a majority of the time it would work. It's not always going to work. You're not always going to get agreement. But this is one way to find it that you might not otherwise. Because the risk is if there's no negotiation, then is the majority going to impose this decision given the risk of the minority's sabotage? If that's the case, that's a majority decision. It's only our vote that counts. But let's say they say no, even the majority says this is too important a decision. We're not willing to make this decision now. So the question is, will the authority impose the decision given the lack of support and risk of sabotage from the whole team? And maybe the decision is that the authority says, no, we need to keep working on it. We've got the time. Let's keep working on this. Let's see what we can come up with. But at some point, if the team is in that polarized conflict, it is the authority's job to make the decision. And when you make that decision, in order to be as respectful with your authority as possible, you have to do the two things outlined in that box. You have to make certain that the team experiences being understood about their point of view that you're disagreeing with, and you have to acknowledge the risk you're taking by not following their advice. I think if you do just those two things, That's the most respectful way to exercise authority when, by definition, your team does not agree. Make sure they experience being understood about their point of view. Acknowledge the risk you're taking. Hey, it's going to take more time. It's going to, we tried it before and it didn't work. It's going to take more resources, whatever. But I want to take those risks. They're happy to wait around and tell you later that they told you so when it fails. And you'll have much less resistance in the implementation of it than any other way. What do you think about this?
It disappeared.
Excuse me. I just think it can get so complicated. I found this very helpful just to have in my mind to kind of know where I am and what the next step is. And the main thing is getting clarity about where the minority is and focusing on them, reviewing their position, and then having the majority restate the position without any spin, without any attitude, without any you stupid idiot stuff. I was working with another company last month, and I was just they seemed like to be really nice to each other, and I was commenting on that, and they said, well, the way we work is I may be in a position of authority today, and the person who's my direct report tomorrow may be in my position, and I may be in theirs. There's tremendous, it's a very flat organization, and people come into a position of authority temporarily and move out of it, and someone who they had report to them moves in, and they move out, and he said, so we're pretty respectful of each other because we don't know who's going to be our boss next time around. Maybe you should treat everybody that way. If you had your team all made up of people who were higher in the hierarchy than you, how would you treat the differences of opinion in that team? We worked with one company where they were moving towards this model of collaboration, trying to get people together to talk and contribute. And one leader was very, very resistant to this. I mean, his opinion was that his employees had no opinions. He even said they were janitors, if that was not their job. And it was difficult for him to have a conversation with employees and find out what their point of view was. But if you want your employees to implement your ideas, you need to know where their mind is already going. Stephen is excellent at this. I mean, he'll know what his opinion is because he's not going to address it until he's figured it out. He's very introverted in that way. But he wants to know what everybody else's opinion is too. He wants to know where their mind is already going. Because if they're already going where he wants them to go, all he has to do is go, great, guys, go. That's terrific. If he comes in and tells them where he wants them to go and they're already wanting to go that way, they're going to like, why are you telling me this? I mean, you think I'm stupid? You think? And you not just lose points, you get negative points as a leader when all he had to do was ask the question in the first place. Here's the problem. What do you all think the solution is? If they're going in the direction he wants them to, great. If they're not, what are they seeing that he's not seeing? Maybe there's something that he hadn't considered. Maybe that'll affect his decision. Maybe he does see, now he knows what he needs to address, what concerns they may have that he has information about that they don't. So it's still moving towards agreement as much as possible. And at some point, as an authority, you always have to be willing to make that decision by authority. But as long as you got those two things in your toolkit and you're willing to do them, I think that hard nut of having the authority is easy to have. It's not about finding the line between collaboration and authority. Those are both inside a circle. It's about just doing it as the way you manage your authority.